The cowboy expected a simple mail-order bride, but the woman who arrived left him speechless. The whistle of the westbound train echoed across the barren stretch of land long before the engine came into sight. Dusty Creek's small depot shimmered beneath the noon sun as heat lines lifted off the tracks. Caleb Walker stood with his boots planted shoulder-width apart, hat lowered over his brow, trying to quiet the strange flutter in his chest. He told himself it was nothing more than nerves. Nothing more than the weight of responsibility. Nothing more than the memory of a past heartbreak he never spoke about. He was expecting a woman today, his bride technically. A woman he'd chosen through letters. A woman he believed to be modest, capable, practical. The kind of woman who would fit ranch life. He'd pictured a widow with a soft voice and steady hands. A woman who wanted simplicity, not extravagance. Caleb had spent most of the morning repairing a corral gate just to keep busy, but when Mrs. Bramble, the station mistress, sent word that the train was running early, he dusted himself off, saddled his horse and ridden the 2 miles into town. Now he waited. And waited. Mrs. Bramble pushed open the station window and leaned her elbows on the sill. "You look like a man fastened Judgment Day instead of a bride." Caleb huffed. "I ain't afraid of a wife." "I didn't say you were afraid. I said you look like you're trying not to sweat through that shirt." He ignored her. Mostly because she wasn't wrong. The train horn wailed, closer now. A cloud of dust rolled toward them as wheels screeched and brakes hissed. Steam billowed across the platform in a thick plume, swallowing everything for a moment. Caleb stepped forward and tugged his hat lower, bracing himself. When the steam thinned, passengers emerged, an elderly couple, a traveling preacher, 2 rough-looking cowhands. And then he saw her. A woman stepped onto the platform with the kind of grace Dusty Creek had never seen, back straight, chin lifted, hands gloved in faded ivory. Her gown, though worn from travel, carried hints of Charleston finery. Not at all what a ranch widow would wear. Her hair, pinned neatly beneath her hat, glimmered like honey touched by sunlight. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped Caleb's breath. It was the fear in her eyes. Fear in something else, hope, raw and trembling. She clutched a single carpetbag to her chest as if holding herself together. Her gaze swept the platform until it met his. For one suspended moment they simply stared. Caleb felt the ground shift beneath him. This woman was not what he ordered. Not what he expected. And definitely not what he'd prepared himself for. She stepped closer. "Are you Mr. Caleb Walker?" Her voice was soft but carried the refined cadence of someone raised far from this dusty town. Caleb swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "You're Evelyn Carter?" She nodded once, tightly, as if afraid any movement would make her fall apart. Mrs. Bramble muttered from the window, "Oh dear. She's carrying secrets if I ever saw a soul carrying them." Caleb heard it. Evelyn heard it too. She flinched. He cleared his throat and forced his voice steady. "Ma'am, you're not quite what I pictured." There was a flicker of pain across her features. Quick, faint, but unmistakable. "No," she admitted softly. "I imagine I'm not." A wind swept in from the west, lifting loose tendrils of her hair and swirling dust around their feet. Her hat wobbled and she caught it with a trembling hand. Caleb noticed it then, the shaking. Not just from nerves. From fear. From exhaustion. Perhaps both. He wished suddenly that he hadn't spoken so bluntly. He should say something kind, something reassuring. But words had never been his strength. "You hungry from the ride?" he managed. She blinked in surprise at the gentle tone. "A bit. I've got some beef sandwiches in the wagon. Figured you'd need food after a long journey." Her shoulders relaxed barely. "That's very thoughtful," she whispered. Caleb offered his hand to take her bag. She hesitated before letting go, as if passing him that carpetbag was an act of trust she wasn't sure she could afford. They walked in silence across the platform. Evelyn tried to hide how overwhelmed she was, but Caleb noticed everything. The way she studied the barren land, the worn storefronts, the distant mountains. Dusty Creek was nothing like Charleston. Not even close. He lifted her bag into the wagon bed and turned to help her climb up. She placed her gloved hand in his, and for a heartbeat Caleb felt something unexpected. A pulse of warmth that cut straight through his calloused exterior. He pulled back too quickly, flustered. Evelyn settled in the wagon seat, folding her hands tightly in her lap. She looked like a woman bracing for rejection. Caleb took the reins, still trying to gather his spinning thoughts. Mrs. Bramble cupped her hands around her mouth. "Lord bless you both. And bless that poor girl twice over." Evelyn's cheeks flushed red. As the wagon rolled away from the depot, Caleb cleared his throat again. "Miss Carter. I'm not a complicated man. But I believe in honesty. And I believe in starting things the right way. Evelyn nodded slowly. Yes, I do too. But her voice wavered. Caleb felt it in his bones. This woman had not told him everything. Not even close. And though he didn't know why yet, one truth settled heavily on him. The woman he had expected was long gone. And the woman beside him was about to change everything. The wagon rolled over the dusty road toward the Walker Ranch, wheels creaking with every bump. Evelyn sat with her back straight, though nothing inside her felt steady. Her gloved hands clenched the hem of her dress so tightly that her knuckles ached. Caleb drove in silence. Not cold silence, more like thoughtful, cautious silence. He wasn't sure what to make of the woman beside him. Every few minutes he glanced her way, only to look forward again as though afraid to study her too long. She noticed every glance. And every hesitation. The Charleston wind had never sounded as loud as the silence between them. The ranch, a world away from Charleston. After nearly an hour of travel, the land began to change. The road widened. Pines thickened along the ridge. Wooden fences stretched across rolling fields, and the distant echo of cattle lowing reached them like a greeting. Evelyn's breath caught. The Walker Ranch was beautiful, rugged, untamed. Nothing like the country estates she'd seen near Charleston. Nothing polished or manicured. Everything here looked lived in, built by hands hardened with honest work. As they approached the house, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, Evelyn felt a pinch of longing she couldn't explain. A real home. A place where she might someday belong. A place where no one knew her past. But belonging required truth. And she had come here with too many lies wrapped around her throat to speak clearly. Caleb stopped the wagon. Evelyn inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Caleb climbed down, walked around, and offered his hand. She let him help her, feeling the strength in his calloused grip. "Welcome to the Walker Ranch," he said quietly. She forced a smile. "It's lovely." Caleb's eyes softened just a little. "Thank you. My pa built the house. Jonah and I finished the barn after he passed." "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. Loss was something she understood in her own way. Caleb shrugged gently, as if grief were a weight he'd learned to carry with silence instead of tears. Inside the house. Evelyn stepped inside, expecting a bachelor's clutter. But the house smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen. A Bible rested open on the table. Boots lined up near the wall. A quilt folded neatly over the small couch. "Your home is," she searched for the right word. "Warm." Caleb blinked. "Warm?" "Yes," she said quickly. "It feels cared for." He cleared his throat. "I do what I can." Evelyn brushed her fingers along the edge of a wooden table. Sturdy, expertly crafted. "You built this." "Jonah and I did. Took us a winter." She wished she could read the expression that flickered across his face. Pride. Sadness? Loneliness? Perhaps all three. Jonah and Ruth arrive. A wagon rumbled outside. Caleb looked toward the window. "That'll be Jonah and Ruth. I told them you'd arrived." Evelyn stiffened. "Already?" Caleb hesitated. "They're family. They'll want to meet you. But they can be a bit enthusiastic." A moment later the door swung open and a cheerful woman with flushed cheeks and warm brown eyes burst in. "You must be Evelyn," Ruth exclaimed before Evelyn could react. Evelyn found herself wrapped in a hug that nearly knocked the breath out of her. The kind of hug she hadn't felt in years, full of genuine welcome, not societal obligation. Ruth pulled back, gripping Evelyn's arms. "You're prettier than Caleb said." "Honestly, brother, why didn't you mention that?" Caleb sputtered. "Ruth?" Before he could finish, Jonah stepped inside. Tall, broad, with a grin as wide as the prairie. "You're the mail-order bride?" he said, eyes twinkling. Evelyn flushed. "Yes." Jonah tipped his hat. "Jonah Walker. Caleb's older brother, occasional troublemaker. Welcome." Ruth elbowed him. "Don't you go scaring her." Evelyn attempted a small smile. "I'm grateful to meet you both." Supper and slipping truths. Ruth, ever the whirlwind, insisted they stay for supper. Within minutes she had bread warming and stew bubbling on the stove while Evelyn tried to help, even though she'd never cooked more than tea in her life. Every knife she held trembled. Every spoon slipped. Every step felt unfamiliar. And Caleb noticed. "You all right?" he murmured. She nodded too quickly. "Just travel weary." Conversation flowed around her like warm water. Stories of ranch life, Caleb's stubbornness, Jonah's mishaps. Evelyn tried to keep up, smiling where appropriate, listening intently. Then Jonah asked the question she had dreaded. "So, Evelyn, How long were you married before your husband passed? Everything in her froze. Her spoon hit the bowl with a soft clink. She opened her mouth. No words came. Jonah, Caleb warned gently. Evelyn forced a breath. He passed last year. It wasn't a complete lie. It was just the wrong husband. A husband who never existed. Ruth's smile softened sympathetically. You poor thing. You must have been so lonely. Very, Evelyn whispered. The room spun. Her chest tightened. She excused herself to wash up, retreating to the kitchen where her hands shook uncontrollably. Ruth's sweet but sharp insight. Ruth followed quietly a moment later. Evelyn. Evelyn turned, wiping her eyes. Yes. Ruth reached out, gently touching her arm. Honey, you're holding something heavy? And I'm not talking about grief. Evelyn's heart dropped. I don't know what you mean. Ruth smiled kindly. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying, there's a difference between grief and fear. One looks backward. The other looks everywhere at once. Evelyn swallowed hard. I'm trying. Truly I am. Ruth squeezed her hand. You don't have to try so hard with us. We're family now, or we will be. Evelyn's throat tightened. No one had called her family in a long time. She returned to the table with Ruth, still trembling inside. A night beneath the stars. After Jonah and Ruth left, Caleb stepped outside to check the horses. Evelyn followed, compelled by a need to breathe the cool night air. He leaned against the porch railing, hands folded, hat pushed up enough to reveal thoughtful eyes. She joined him, keeping a respectful distance. You didn't tell me everything, Caleb said quietly, no anger in his tone, just a steady truth. Evelyn looked down at her clasped hands. No, I didn't. Why? Tears gathered behind her eyes, threatening to spill. Because if I had, you never would have sent for me. Caleb moved his jaw thoughtfully, as if her words struck deeper than she intended. He didn't speak for a long moment. The stars glittered overhead. A barn owl hooted somewhere in the distance. Finally, Caleb said softly, I don't know who you really are yet, Evelyn Carter. But I reckon God brought you here for a reason. Her breath hitched. You think God has anything to do with this? I think he has a hand in everything, Caleb murmured. Even the parts that don't make sense. Evelyn looked up, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since arriving. In that gaze she saw confusion, caution, and something that nearly broke her, kindness. She didn't deserve his kindness. But she needed it more than she'd ever needed anything. Caleb pushed off the railing. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new start. Evelyn stood alone on the porch long after he went inside, staring at the stars until her vision blurred with tears. A house built on lies could not stand forever. But maybe, just maybe, God could build something new, even out of her shattered pieces. Morning sunlight spilled across the Walker Ranch like honey, warming the mist that hovered over the fields. Evelyn stood at the window of her small guest room, gazing at the mountains, their peaks brushed with gold. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe, really breathe, as if God himself had painted a reminder across the horizon. Mercies are new every morning. But the peace didn't last. Not when the truth was still locked inside her chest like a ticking clock. She had lied to Caleb. Lied to the brother and sister-in-law who embraced her. Lied to the pastor who would someday join their hands. And it was only a matter of time before her lies caught up with her. A wagon ride filled with unspoken fears. Caleb knocked gently on her door. Evelyn? You awake? She startled, smoothing her wrinkled dress. Yes, I'm ready. He stood waiting downstairs, hat in hand, eyes unreadable. I'm taking you to meet Pastor Whitmore today. Figure we ought to talk about what comes next. Evelyn nodded, heart hammering. Of course. They rode into town together, the wagon wheels crunching over gravel. Unlike the awkward silence of the previous day, this silence felt heavier, full of questions that neither dared to ask yet. Caleb glanced at her as they passed a meadow glowing in sunlight. Did you sleep all right? I tried. He nodded as if he understood more than she said. When the church steeple came into view, Evelyn's stomach twisted. She wasn't ready to stand before a pastor, before God, and pretend she was someone she wasn't. Pastor Whitmore, a man who sees deeper than most. The small white chapel smelled faintly of pine and old hymnals. Pastor Whitmore, a tall man with silver hair and gentle eyes, stepped forward with a warm smile. Caleb Walker. Good to see you again. Then he turned to Evelyn. And this must be the bride-to-be. The words hit Evelyn like a stone to the chest. Bride-to-be. A title she desperately wanted. A title she had not earned honestly. She curtsied. "It's a pleasure, Pastor." He studied her face for a long moment, too long. His eyes were kind but discerning, as if he could see the shadows she tried so hard to hide. The pastor invited them to sit in the wooden pews. "Tell me about yourselves," he said gently. Caleb cleared his throat. "Evelyn's come a long way. And, well, we've got some thinking to do about the wedding date." Pastor Whitmore looked at Evelyn. "And you, my dear? How do you feel about the journey ahead?" Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. "I want to move forward in honesty and hope." Pastor Whitmore's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Honesty is a foundation the Lord blesses," he said softly. "But dishonesty has a way of following us, even when we try to outrun it." Evelyn's breath hitched. A chill crept up her spine. Caleb turned to look at her, brow furrowed. "You all right?" "Yes," she whispered. The pastor's words hit close to home. Pastor Whitmore gave her a gentle smile. "Remember, fear is often a sign that truth is knocking." Her throat tightened. "What if telling the truth ruins everything?" The pastor folded his hands. "My dear, truth can break things, but it can also free them. God's mercy meets us where our lies end." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't confess, not now. Not here. Not with Caleb sitting beside her, watching every tremble. Pastor Whitmore sensed her struggle. "When the time is right, you'll know what to do." Mud, humiliation, and a new wound opened. When they stepped outside, the sky had darkened with thick gray clouds. A wagon barreled down the road, and before Caleb could pull her aside, a splash of muddy water shot up, covering Evelyn from the waist down. She gasped, staring at her ruined dress. Dark mud spattered her bodice and gloves. "Oh dear heavens," she whispered, mortified. Caleb rushed to her side. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry. That fool wasn't watching that." She shook her head quickly. "It's my fault. I should have been paying attention." Caleb frowned. "It ain't your fault. You didn't step in front of that wagon. I should have moved faster." "Evelyn." His voice firm but gentle. "You apologize too much." She stilled. "It makes a man wonder what you think you owe the whole world." Her breath faltered. She did owe the world. Or so she believed. I'm sorry," she whispered again automatically. Caleb exhaled sharply. "See? Even now." Shame climbed her neck, burning. She turned away, fighting tears. Caleb didn't understand. He couldn't. He didn't know what it felt like to run from a past branded on you like a scar. The discovery that shatters everything. Back at the ranch, Evelyn retreated to wash her dress, hands trembling as she scrubbed the mud from the delicate fabric. Caleb, meanwhile, carried her carpet bag upstairs to keep it from the rain beginning to fall. He set the bag on the bed, and that's when he saw it. A slip of paper sticking out from the side flap. Not curiosity, instinct, made him straighten it. Evelyn's name was written in elegant script. And beneath it a short line caught his eye. "Your absence has caused quite the scandal, Evelyn. You must not return until the debts are settled." Caleb froze. "Debts? Scandal? Absence?" He didn't mean to read further, but her name was there, and something inside him whispered truth is knocking. His stomach knotted. The woman in his home was not just hiding something small. She was hiding her entire life. The confrontation on the porch. Thunder cracked in the distance as evening fell. Evelyn stepped onto the porch to fetch the lanterns when she found Caleb standing there, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. "Caleb? Are you all right?" He didn't look at her. Not at first. When he finally turned, he held the letter in his hand. Evelyn's blood ran cold. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It was sticking out of your bag." She shook her head. "Caleb, I can explain. You were never a widow," he said quietly. "Were you?" Her knees nearly buckled. "You weren't run out of Charleston by grief," he continued. "You ran because of a scandal. Because of debts." Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. "Please, let me explain. How much of what you told me was true?" His voice cracked like dry wood. Not angry. Not shouting. But wounded. Deeply. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Not your kindness," she whispered. "Not your letters. Not the way you made me hope again." He looked away sharply, hurting. "Why me, Evelyn?" A soft question. A devastating one. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Because you were the first good man who ever wrote to me without asking what I could offer in return." Caleb closed his eyes for a long, painful moment. "You should have trusted me with the truth," he murmured. "I was afraid," she whispered. "People always leave when they see who I really am." Caleb opened his eyes again, so blue they nearly glowed in the storm-darkened air. I didn't leave, he said quietly. Not yet. Lightning flashed. Evelyn trembled. The truth was out now, bare, raw, and ripping open old wounds in both of them. But somewhere beneath the hurt, Caleb felt something unexpected. Compassion. A pull toward her he did not understand. A whisper in his spirit that perhaps this was not the end, but the beginning of God's work. The house seemed larger in the silence between them, a cavernous thing made of wood and the unspoken. Evening light slanted through the parlor window, painting the floor in bars of gold and dust. Caleb sat at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold, fingers tapping a rhythm he didn't mean to keep. The letter he had found lay folded beside his plate like a small accusation. Evelyn moved through the house with the careful, quiet steps of someone trying not to wake a sleeping household, or a sleeping conscience. Each corner she rounded felt heavier than the last. The weight of what she'd told and not told pressed into her skin. She had expected anger. She had expected disappointment. She had not expected the silence that felt, somehow worse, like a slow closing of a door. Distance built out of hurt. For 2 days their house hummed with normal chores and a polite distance. Ruth and Jonah continued their visits, but even their laughter couldn't bridge the space that had opened in the middle of the table. Caleb did not speak much. When he did, his voice was even and measured. He ate his food, checked the fence lines, and kept to the routine that steadied him. He answered Evelyn's questions with short sentences, polite but cool. Evelyn flinched at the way he looked at her, the same look she'd seen in the mirror for years. Assessment, reserved judgment, the calculation of whether to stay or to leave. Guilt gnawed at her. Shame had taught her to expect rejection. Late one afternoon, when the light was low and the hens were settling in, she told him she was leaving. I can't stay where I'm not wanted, she said, voice nearly swallowed by the hush. Caleb's hand stilled over the fence pliers. Where would you go? He asked, not unkindly. She had rehearsed answers that sounded brave, perhaps a return to Charleston, perhaps boarding with a woman in town. But the truth in her chest was simple and raw. I don't know. I don't have anywhere that feels like mine anymore, she admitted. Caleb's jaw worked. His eyes, which rarely betrayed him, looked pained. Evelyn. You don't have to tell me to stay, she cut in, shame heating her face. I wasn't the woman you wrote to. I lied. You deserve better than this. He folded his arms, leaning on the rail as if the porch itself were something to steady him. You lied to me, he said finally. He wasn't angry, he was weary. I thought I was choosing a partner to share the dust and the work. I didn't sign up to be misled. Her breath caught. I know. Caleb turned his face away and stared at the distant ridge, jaw clenched. The wind picked up, whispering through the pines like leaves of a hymn. A ride in the storm. The next morning a low, gray sky pressed down on the ranch. Clouds bulged heavy with threat. Caleb saddled his horse early, the need to be busy in armor against the confusion in his chest. He told himself he was checking fences, but every mile he put between the house and his thoughts only tightened the knot in his gut. Evelyn watched him go, heart hollow. She felt the pull to follow, to stop him, to fix what she had broken. But she had also learned the hard way that love offered freely without truth was brittle. Caleb rode into a wind that tore at the edges of his hat. Rain began as a whisper, then stung his cheeks. He spurred his horse on, checking gates and posts, trying to outrun a storm that seemed to come from inside him as much as from the sky. The thunder caught him near the back pasture where the cattle shifted nervously. He frowned. A section of fencing had come down by the ravine, possibly from last night's thaw. He dismounted and worked, soaked through as the first real drops came. All at once the sky let go. Sheets of rain hammered the earth. Lightning tore the clouds open. Caleb's coat darkened from black to oil-slick gray. Mud rose white and heavy around his boots. He should have been angry at the weather, at the land, at circumstance, but the rawness of Evelyn's confession echoed with every strike of thunder. The world was loud, but his hurt was louder. Evelyn's prayer by the hearth. Back at the house, Evelyn had lit the lanterns and set a pot on the stove. The house smelled of wet wool and the faint sweetness of stew. Her hands worked on autopilot folding linens, but her heart could not follow. She sank into the chair by the hearth, the lamplight haloing her hair. She hadn't been to church in years, not the kind of church where her social friends would see her, but something in her had started to ache for the simple, steady presence of prayer. She bowed her head. Lord, she whispered, so low even the stove wouldn't hear, I don't know how to make this right. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of lying. If you brought me here for a reason, help me know what that reason is. Give me courage. Give me humility. If I'm meant to stay, show me how to be worthy of his trust. If I'm meant to go, help me go with the truth. Tears slid down her cheeks, warm and honest. She had never asked for such plain things before. The Charleston drawing rooms rarely needed such prayers. A sudden gust rattled the windows. The house seemed to bow with the storm. She rose and went to the door as if pulled by an invisible thread, half to check the animals, half to see what had become of the man she had hurt. Through the rain she could just make out the blurred figure of Caleb near the barn, working with brutal determination to secure a broken gate. He looked smaller in the downpour, like a lone oak bent beneath a gale. She wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped into the rain. The turning point. Caleb didn't see her at first. He was focused on driving the last stake into the soft earth. The storm had stripped him to the raw truth he'd been guarding. He could not tell whether what he felt for this woman was anger enough to push her away, or something else entirely. She moved up beside him, soaked and trembling. For a heartbeat they were both drenched in rain and silence, the world reduced to the hiss between them. "I didn't come to accuse you," Caleb said at last, voice low and steady. "I came to do what needs doing on this ranch." Evelyn's teeth chattered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He set the stake and straightened. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "You apologized again?" he observed, half amused and half aching. She closed her eyes. "It's the first thing I do." He looked at her, really looked, seeing the exhaustion and the shame in the tiny stubborn thread of hope. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" he asked simply. Her voice was a thin whisper. "Because I thought you'd send me away. Because I thought my past would make you run. Because I was afraid no one would take me after I'd lied." Caleb's shoulders dropped a fraction. The thunder rolled, and in that sound she heard something like surrender. "Do you think I asked for a perfect woman?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "No." "Then why did you think you had to be one?" She had no answer. He turned away to look out over the pasture, rain streaking his face. "I ain't perfect either, Evelyn. I ain't got no silver spoons. I've got scars from my own mistakes. If all I want is perfect, well, there ain't nobody at this place who'd measure up." She met his eyes, breath caught between hope and fear. "So, what do you want?" He hesitated, longer than she expected, like a man calibrating a faith he hadn't used in years. "I want honest," he said finally. "I want someone who'll tell me the truth even if it hurts. I want someone who'll work beside me, not someone who's afraid of the dirt." Evelyn felt something in her chest unclench. "I can do that," she whispered. "I want to do that. I want to be better." He stepped closer. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat and fell onto his collar. He reached out, not to take but to steady, a practical gesture more than romance. "Don't leave yet," he said, voice quiet but clear. "I didn't say I didn't want you. I said I needed the truth." Her breath hitched. "I'm too afraid to hurt you more." "You already have," he admitted. "And you know what? Hurt is part of life. We're all carrying it. Maybe God brings folks together to learn how to carry it together." Lightning split the sky, and in that flash the two of them looked like figures carved in alabaster, imperfect, wet, real. Caleb wiped his hand across his face and laughed, a rough, surprised sound that turned into something like relief. "Come inside," he said. "We'll get you warm. We'll patch the fence in the morning, together." A seed planted. That night they sat close by the fire, the house cozy after the storm's wrath. They didn't rush to fill the empty spaces between their words, but silence felt different now, less like a wall and more like a pause that made room for what might come next. Evelyn told small truths, about her mother's business troubles, about the fear that people would look at her and know her worth by what she carried for others rather than by who she was. Caleb listened, sometimes interrupting with a practical question about chores or weather, sometimes simply letting her speak. Neither promised forever in grand declarations. Instead they took smaller vows, to be honest, to work, to attend Sunday service at Pastor Whitmore's, to repair fences together when the weather allowed. Before bed Evelyn knelt beside her little guest room bed and prayed, this time not a plea for escape, but a quiet thanksgiving for courage given and for a man who, in his own quiet way, had decided not to walk away. "Lord," she whispered, "thank you for not letting me run forever. If this is the place you meant for me, help me to earn it honestly. Help me to love him without hiding. Amen." Outside the house settled. The pines whispered a lullaby. The storm had passed, and in the aftermath the ranch smelled of wet earth and new possibility. It would not all be easy. Truth had cracked things open and the repair would take work. But for the first time since she boarded that train, Evelyn felt like someone might see her. Not the version she'd invented, but the actual flawed woman who wanted to change. And Caleb, still cautious, still holding his hurt, had opened a small door. It wasn't forgiveness fully given, nor trust fully rebuilt. It was something quieter and more dangerous, the willingness to try. God often begins great things in small, unremarkable moments like this, by lantern light, in the hush after a storm, where two people brave the truth and let mercy have a hand. The storm left behind a world washed clean. By morning, sunlight glittered on puddles nestled between tufts of prairie grass, and the air smelled fresh, like rain and pine and something quietly hopeful. Evelyn woke before dawn. This time not with dread, but with a new, untested resolve. She dressed simply in the clothes Ruth had given her, pushed her hair into a ribbon, and stepped into the cool morning. Mist lifted off the pasture in thin, white veils. Birds chattered from the fence post. She had promised Caleb honesty and effort. Today she would prove she meant it. The first trial of will, the barn. Caleb was already in the barn, rolling up his sleeves as he forked hay into the trough. The early light fell across his features, highlighting the rugged line of his jaw. He didn't hear her enter at first. He worked with the same quiet intensity he gave everything, every fence, every calf, every responsibility that couldn't afford failure. Evelyn hovered near the doorway, stomach tight. "Good morning," she managed. Caleb paused, glanced up and nodded. "Mornin'. No hurt. No distance. But guarded." She stepped closer. "I'd like to help today. If you'll tell me what needs doing." Caleb leaned on the fork handle and studied her. Not skeptically, but like a man assessing truth without rushing judgment. "Feed in the horses first," he said. "You know how to lift a saddle blanket?" "I can learn." He half smiled. "Then that's enough." He guided her through brush of mane, measure of oats, brushing down Larkspur's flank. At first her hands trembled, but Caleb's quiet instructions steadied her. "No need to rush," he murmured. "Animals can sense fear faster than a man can." "I'm not afraid of the horse," she said. "Didn't say you were." He didn't push. She was grateful. Time, dust, and small wins. As the morning warmed, Caleb showed her each chore, letting her attempt them instead of doing them for her. He watched her struggle to lift a water bucket twice her size. He watched her try, unsuccessfully, to latch the stubborn west gate. He watched her get hay stuck in her hair and dirt on the hem of her skirt. He expected complaints or fanciful frustration. But instead, she laughed. Not perfectly, not freely, but genuinely, at herself. "I suppose grace doesn't mean doing things gracefully," she said, breathless from the effort of riding a wheelbarrow she toppled. Caleb's faint smile deepened. Never met a ranch hand who did. They worked side by side until the sun rose high. Sweat beaded on Evelyn's temples, and stray pieces of hair curled around her face. She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of dust. Caleb had seen beauty before. But something about this kind, unadorned, determined, unself-conscious, settled into him like the quiet truth of sunrise. At the fence line, the heart begins to speak. When noon approached, Caleb led her to the hilltop where the broken section of fence lay, torn from last night's storm. Piles of boards waited to be hammered in place. "Thought we could finish what we started," he said. Evelyn took the hammer he offered. It felt heavy, awkward. "You sure you want me helping?" she asked softly. "I said we'd do it together," Caleb replied. "I meant that." She nodded and knelt beside him. They worked in companionable silence, Caleb's steady, practiced swing setting the stakes, Evelyn's smaller efforts guiding the rails into place. Caleb stole a glance at her every few minutes. Evelyn noticed but pretended she didn't. He cleared his throat. "You didn't sleep well last night." "How can you tell?" "You're movin' like someone who's been thinkin' all night instead of restin'." She hesitated, then admitted the truth. "I was praying." Caleb's hands stilled. He didn't mock or question. "About what?" "Courage," she said. "And forgiveness." "For me to forgive you? For me to stop being afraid of deserving it?" Caleb lowered the hammer. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her, truly looked, until she felt seen in a way she hadn't since she was a girl. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I don't want you earning my forgiveness. Forgiveness ain't earned. It's offered." Her breath wobbled. "Are you offering it?" He swallowed. His voice roughened. "I'm trying. And that was enough to water a small seed of hope inside her. An accident and a confession. As they lifted a rail together, Evelyn's grip slipped. The board dropped onto the grass with a heavy thud, missing her foot by inches. Caleb moved instantly, protective instinct flaring. "Careful there." "I'm sorry." Evelyn. His voice gentle but firm. Stop apologizing for every breath. You're learning. That's all I ask. She blinked back emotion. I just want to be someone you can trust. You startin' to be. Her heart fluttered, startled. Then Caleb added the words she didn't expect. And you should know something else. He let out a slow breath. You're not the only one who's been afraid. Evelyn stared. You? He nodded, eyes on the horizon. I asked for a mail-order bride, 'cause I figured it was simpler than courtin'. Safer. Cleaner. No past to worry about. No woman to disappoint. I didn't think God had anything left for me in. He stopped. In matters of the heart. Evelyn's voice softened. But I'm the opposite of simple. Caleb's gaze warmed. You're real. That counts more. Something changed in the air then, like the wind had turned warm, like the earth itself shifted closer. At supper, a little window of peace. Ruth and Jonah joined them that evening. The table was full, the chatter easy. Even Ruth noticed the change before anyone spoke of it. You look flushed, Ruth teased Evelyn as she served biscuits. Been working Caleb's chores? Evelyn grinned shyly. Trying to. About time he had help, Jonah muttered with a smirk. Caleb sent him a warning glare, which only made Jonah chuckle into his stew. The warmth of the room seeped into Evelyn's bones. She felt, if only for a moment, like part of something that could become home. A quiet moment by the door. After dinner, Caleb walked Evelyn to the porch. The sky was streaked with deep rose and violet. Crickets tuned their evening music. Evelyn paused before stepping inside. Today meant a great deal to me, she said softly. Thank you, for letting me try. Caleb rested one hand against the porch post. You did more than try. Then what did I do? He hesitated, only a beat before answering. You stayed. The words struck her deeper than any declaration. She swallowed. And that's enough? For today, Caleb said. Tomorrow, we'll see what God writes next. He tipped his hat and walked off toward the barn, leaving Evelyn breathless and trembling with the first flicker of something dangerously close to love. The gathering of hope. That night Evelyn wrote in the small journal Ruth had given her. Today I learned that redemption isn't grand or loud. It's slow. It's muddy. It's humbling. And it feels like grace wearing work boots. I am not forgiven fully yet. But I am seen. And maybe, just maybe you want it. She closed the book with trembling fingers. Outside the lanterns winked low. The sky settled into the hush of a starlit promise. Tomorrow would bring its own trials. But tonight? Tonight she believed, fully and finally, that God had brought her here not by accident, but by mercy. Annabelle woke before dawn, unable to stay in bed another moment. The light creeping through the cabin window looked almost accusing, as though it knew everything she had kept hidden. Her heart thudded heavily beneath her nightgown, each beat a reminder. Today she would tell Caleb the truth. And after that, well, God alone knew what would happen. She dressed quietly, smoothing the simple calico dress over her trembling hands. Caleb had given her the material for it a week earlier, insisting she deserved something of her own. Every stitch she'd sewn mocked her now, because it had been offered to a woman Caleb believed her to be, not the one she truly was. She stepped outside and found Caleb already saddling Jasper, his sorrel horse. Morning fog curled along the ground like pale ribbons, and the ranch looked washed in silver. Caleb glanced up. You're up early, he said with a soft smile. Didn't sleep well? Annabelle swallowed. There's something we need to talk about. Caleb's brow lifted with a small, gentle concern. All right. I'm listening. But the words stuck. Her tongue felt too thick, her throat too tight. Only fear emerged, and fear won. Later, she whispered. Please. Caleb watched her a long moment, then nodded. Later then. I'll be nearby if you need me. He always said that, if you need me, never knowing how deeply she did. The letter that changed everything. By noon, Annabelle had rewritten her confession a dozen times. She sat at the kitchen table with an ink-stained hand, surrounded by balled-up papers like small white regrets. Finally she forced herself to write the truth plainly. My real name is Annabelle Whitmore. I was not a poor seamstress from Savannah. I was a socialite who lied to escape a life I no longer wanted. Her hands shook as she wrote the last part. And I never meant to deceive you. I only hoped you would someday see the woman I want to become, not the one I was raised to be. She folded the letter with trembling care. Caleb returns. Hoofs thundered outside. Caleb's voice carried through the window, stern, commanding, directed at the ranch hands who'd accidentally let a steer break free. The man was steady, dependable, honorable. Everything she wasn't. Annabelle stood when he entered the cabin. Dust streaked his shirt, sweat dampened his temples. He looked tired but always kind. "You all right?" Caleb asked, noticing her pale face. Annabelle handed him the folded letter. "I need you to read this. Alone." Caleb took it. His eyes searched hers, soft but alert. Concern deepened the line between his brows. "Annie, is this something bad?" Her voice cracked. "It's something true." Caleb nodded once, then stepped outside onto the porch to read. The silence that felt like forever. Annabelle paced inside the cabin, wringing her hands. Every heartbeat echoed like a hammer in her ears. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters like bones. Annabelle finally forced herself to open the door. Caleb stood near the railing, her letter in his hand, creased, thumb-worn already. He wasn't angry, not visibly. But something deeper had settled over him, disappointment mixed with heartache. He looked up slowly. "Annabelle Whitmore," he said quietly, "tell me the whole truth. With your own voice." Her knees nearly gave out. The confession. She stepped onto the porch, unable to lift her gaze fully. "I was raised in society," she began. "Tea lessons, dance halls, dress fittings. A world of polished lies." "And the ad?" Caleb asked. "The story of your parents? The seamstress job?" "All of it," she whispered. "I wrote what I thought a cowboy would want. Someone humble. Someone strong. Someone simple." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And you thought you weren't enough on your own." Tears blurred her vision. "I thought I wasn't anything on my own." Caleb looked out over the ranch, wind tugging at his shirt. "You should have trusted me with the truth, Annie." "I know," she choked. "And I'm so sorry." The moment everything hung in the balance. Caleb finally met her eyes. His were not cold, but they were wounded. "When you came here, I said all I wanted was honesty. A partner I could build something real with." "I know. You broke that." "I know." Their breath tangled in the cold afternoon air. The silence stretched long and heavy. "Caleb," her voice trembled. "Can you forgive me?" He didn't answer at first. Instead he folded the letter carefully, too carefully, like a man trying to handle something fragile without letting it cut him again. Then he said, "I need time, Annie." Those 3 words struck harder than any anger could have. He tipped his hat, stepped off the porch and walked toward the barn. Not slamming doors. Not shouting. Just walking away with a heart too full to speak. Annabelle sank onto the porch steps, tears falling into her lap. The truth was out. Now all she could do was pray. And hope. Because love, true love, couldn't grow on lies. But maybe with God's grace, it could grow on truth. The morning sun rose over the Ward Ranch with a pale, hesitant warmth, as though even heaven itself was unsure how the day would end. Annabelle stood at the wash basin, hands trembling as she wrung out a cloth. Her eyes were swollen from crying most of the night. Caleb hadn't returned to the cabin until hours after sunset. She'd heard his footsteps outside, the soft creak of the barn door, the rustle of hay. He hadn't come inside, not even to get his supper. And Annabelle had lain awake, staring at the wooden ceiling beams, whispering fragile prayers. "Lord, don't let this end before it has the chance to begin." The quiet after the storm. Annabelle forced herself to leave the cabin. She couldn't hide, not from the work and not from the consequences. The ranch hands glanced her way as she crossed the yard, sympathy in some eyes, curiosity in others. They knew something was wrong. Caleb Ward wasn't a man who carried his emotions lightly. When he was hurt, the whole ranch felt the shift. She found him near the corral, checking a broken fence board. His shirt sleeves were rolled, exposing strong, dust-covered forearms. Sweat darkened his collar. He was working harder than usual, a man using labor to silence thought. "Caleb." Her voice was gentle, but the wind nearly stole it away. He stiffened. Then slowly, very slowly, turned toward her. "Annie," he said. Not cold. Not warm. Simply guarded. Her heart pinched. "May we talk?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, I reckon we should." He dusted off his hands and walked with her to the small overlook behind the barn, a quiet spot shaded by an old juniper tree. He leaned against the fence railing, arms folded, watching her with steady eyes that made her knees shake. A woman who finally speaks with her own voice. Annabelle swallowed. "I don't expect anything from you," she began. "Not forgiveness. Not affection. Not a second chance." Caleb's gaze flickered, pained. I deceived you, she continued. Not out of malice, but fear. What were you afraid of? Caleb asked softly. She looked down at her hands. Of being unwanted. Of being seen and found lacking. Of living a life where I was always performing, never known. A tear splashed onto her fingers. She didn't bother to wipe it away. You wanted someone simple, she whispered, but I am complicated. A woman raised in a world where truth was an accessory, worn only when convenient. Caleb's expression softened slightly, but he remained quiet. She stepped closer, courage trembling through her. I lied, Caleb. But these past weeks were the most honest of my life. I learned to work, to serve, to pray with purpose, to hope again. Her breath shuddered. And I learned to love again. Caleb's arms slowly lowered from his chest. You, love? He repeated, voice low. Annabelle nodded, tears streaking freely now. I do. I love this land, this home, and I love the man who gave me a chance I never deserved. She inhaled deeply. You. The word hung in the air like a confession at the foot of a cross. Caleb's heart finally speaks. Caleb looked away, jaw working, eyes brightening with something she couldn't read. The sun cast a halo of light around him, catching in his hair, his lashes. Annie, he said finally, voice rough with emotion, I ain't angry at who you were. I'm hurt because you didn't trust me with it. She nodded, trembling. I know. I don't need a perfect woman, he continued quietly. I need a truthful one. A partner. Someone who'll walk through life with me, even when it's messy. Annabelle's breath caught. And I don't think God brought you here by accident, Caleb added, his voice thickening. Feels to me like he put two broken pieces side by side, hoping we'd learn how they fit. Annabelle's tears came harder. Caleb stepped closer now, close enough that she could smell cedar, horse sweat, and the warmth that was uniquely him. Annie, he murmured, I meant what I said the first day you arrived. I want a woman to build something real with. He touched his chest. And the truth is, I've grown to care for you. More than I planned. More than I wanted even. She let out a soft, desperate laugh. But, he continued, I had to know that you'd stand here today as yourself, not the woman you pretended to be. Annabelle lifted her chin, tears shining. This is me, she whispered. All of me. Grace declared. Slowly, Caleb reached out and took her trembling hands in his rough, warm ones. Then I forgive you. She gasped. He squeezed her fingers gently. I ain't throwing away a good woman because she's scared. I get scared too, Annie. I just hide it behind a hat and some stubborn pride. She let out a breathy, tearful laugh. But listen close, Caleb said, voice deepening. No more lies. Not ever again. Never, she whispered. I swear it. Good. His thumb brushed her knuckles. Then we can start over. Start over? Caleb smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since her confession. As Caleb Ward and Annabelle Whitmore. Not who we thought we wanted. Just who we are. Annabelle covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing with relief. A love made new. Caleb stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, slowly, reverently, as if she were something precious. She sank into him, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered. You did, he said gently. But then you told the truth. And that's how you won me back. He tipped her chin up and kissed her forehead, a tender, faith-filled promise. The juniper branches rustled above them, almost like a benediction. The last scene, a beginning. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold and rose, Caleb and Annabelle walked hand in hand into the cabin. No more lies. No more fear. Just two hearts learning what love, true, honest, God-blessed love, really meant. Caleb paused at the door, looking down at her. Annie? Yes. This time tomorrow, maybe we talk to Pastor Reed. Her heart fluttered. About us. About making this official. Annabelle's smile trembled with joy. Yes, she whispered. Oh yes. Caleb squeezed her hand and opened the door to their future. A future built on truth. Restored by grace. And bound by a forever kind of love.